Okay, in this latest theme of talking about why we solve problems the way we do, I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of problem solving. So there's a lot of ways that psychology affects pretty much everything you do at work. I'm not an expert in that. I have like a rudimentary understanding of things, but I do know a few things about the biggest things that affect us is one is our resistance to change, and two is we have a lot of biases that affect how we think about things. Now, interpersonal relationships are also greatly affected by psychology, but that's just too big of a topic for this course. And, that kind of stuff is well beyond me. That's kind of professional therapy level stuff. But if you know about it and you know that that is a factor, you can do something about it at least. But the things that I do have an opportunity to talk to you about here that I can help with is the first which is resistance to change. So when we talk about being resistant to change, we're not really resistant to change. We're resistant to the thing that change, the negative change in our mind brings. So if I was to offer you, $5 million in a house in the mountains and you had to move to get it, most people would not be too resistant to that. They might ask, well, can I have the money in here? Can I buy a different house? And you say, no, that's a deal. Most people would take it and be happy about it. They wouldn't have a lot of pushback on it and say, no, I'm not going to take that money. I'm not going to move. So it's not the change. It's the fact that we lose control. We have a lot of uncertainty when we have. We feel overloaded. We feel like it's not worth it. So there is a methodology to go through that, and it's called ADKAR. And it's basically if you're a leader, or even if you're trying to figure this out on your own and you understand what you're going through, you can do better at managing this resistance to the changes that you're facing. So the first is being aware of it. So, understand why the change is needed, understand that you're going through a change. First of all, make sure that you kind of are aware that something's happening. You figure out how to improve the desire to change among your employees, or your team members. So if you can create a feeling that, problem solving is going to make things better, and you show evidence in history and you can point to a positive experience with it, it's easier to make the change. Knowledge, the more you give people training. So the training that, you might be going through right now is related to that. If you're uncomfortable with something new, it's harder to accept it. If you're very well versed in it, you have good understanding of what it is, what it isn't, how to deal with it, how to handle things, you get much better at managing that change. You develop abilities based on your knowledge and practice, and then you reinforce it. So when you start having positive experiences with change or problem solving, you keep pushing the positive experiences. So you reinforce success. So as people get better at problem solving, you give them more opportunities to solve problems, do things they want, give people, the opportunity to join projects that they like, put problem solving teams together to handle things that are bothering them. So the more you can be focused on making good experiences and making people want to do it more, you're going to be better at getting problem solved in your organization. So if you want to get away from that gut feel approach and you want to get people to be more embracing of problem solving and the change that comes with it, this is a good methodology and good approach. Now, one of the things that prevents you from doing this is the bias I talked about earlier. So there's a lot of different types of biases. And before I go into that, let's just talk about what a bias is. And it's basically a mental shortcut. And if we don't have a process in place, these mental shortcuts take over. It's sometimes they're good, but when we talk about these biases, we're talking about the negative impact of them. So what am I talking about here? Well, the first one is this thing called confirmation bias. So this just says if you find information that reinforces your view, you put a heavier weight on it than something that goes against your view. So if you are being told you want to have your bosses want to have a lean organization, they want to reduce inventory, every time there's a problem with inventory being lowered, that is evidence that you take to heart. When you have the water level lowered, the inventory level goes down and things run smoothly, you might attribute that to something else, and you don't put as much weight into that as being a factor. So basically, you just weight the stuff that confirms what you are thinking more than the stuff that opposes it. So you don't weigh everything equally. There's also something called availability bias, and that's basically where you weigh the data that's available heavier than the data that you need. And this often happens when you have a CRM or customer resource management type of software, or an ERP, an enterprise management software system. If those are in place and you can pull off reports, often we just gravitate to the report rather than what we need because it's easy and it's available. So we tend to put a lot more weight in that than the other data. We also have this overconfidence that comes into play, and I've talked about that a lot. We think we're better than we are at problem solving. And there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that basically says if you're a top performer, you tend to underestimate how well you did on something. And if you're a bottom performer, you tend to overestimate it. So what we find is that if you're not a very good problem solver, you rely too much on gut feel, you don't have a good system in place, you tend to think your solutions are better than they really are. And now these are just a few of them. There's a lot of other ones that go in there. There's things like anchor bias, where the first thing that you see is the most impactful to you. And conversely, there's something called recency bias, where the most recent thing you see carries the most weight. And those two things are opposites. So not every bias is going to affect each person exactly the same every time. Now, there's also this problem with psychology where we start to confuse familiar with effective. And what I mean by that is we go through all these daily decisions and we start to feel comfortable with them. And we start to think that these small choices feel like problem solving to us. So we think about, how am I going to drive to work today? Am I going to take the expressway? Or am I going to take the back roads? We start thinking these are us solving problems. And because we get to work good, we are effective at it. We think we did a good job of solving the problem. And we think our problem solving methods are effective. And the truth is, we've already solved this problem in the past. And now we're just applying some conditions to it. So it's not really going through a very rigorous problem solving process. It's just applying an if then statement to something. So we do that a lot with our daily decisions. And that gives us that false confidence. I've said this over and over. The problem we have is that people think that they're better than they are at problem solving. And this often comes because we've been effective in the past at using gut feel, but it's also because we often think that being familiar with a process makes us really good at solving problems there. And the truth is, I would rather have a good problem solver who is not familiar with a process working on something than somebody who's really familiar with the process, but not a good problem solver. So the problem solving skill trumps the process skill, the process knowledge, because you can always go out and ask people and do analysis on that process. But if you don't know problem solving skills, you're not going to know to do that. And then the final one here is that we often push back and have this idea that structure feels too restrictive for us. So problem solving is a creative process. We do have to come up with good ideas. So all this framework of problem solving isn't going to tell you what to do. It's going to create the conditions where your creativity can be unleashed. You can push yourself to get more ideas out. You can ask more people. All the things that problem solving processes do, get more ideas on the table. And these ideas are going to be more aligned with the conditions that you're facing, that you're dealing with, the specific numbers. You're going to have a better understanding of what needs to get done, but you still have to unleash creativity. And if we think about structure as being restrictive, it's a problem, and we never get over that mental leap that it's a good thing to do. If we think that structure takes down all the barriers to creativity, it takes down all the distraction, it takes down all the incorrect information that kind of falls into the mix. If we look at it that way, we now see how it can be more effective at helping us open up more creative solutions. That's all I got. Have a good day.